sovereign nation that protected liberty here at home, and yet traded with people and traveled and were friends with everybody, we still would not need the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, the NAFTA or NAFTA or the New World Order at all.
But today, the largest countries of the world have agreed a global plan for recovery and reform. This involves the biggest interest rate cuts in history, the biggest fiscal stimulus we have ever seen, the biggest increase in resources in the history of our international institutions, with 250 billion, more money than ever before for trade finance as well. For the first time, we have a common approach around the world to cleaning up banks' balance sheets and restoring lending, and we have maintained our commitment to help the world's poorest, and we have put more money aside for that and also for a green recovery. This is collective action. I think a new world order is emerging, and with it the foundations of a new and progressive era of international cooperation.
You know, the other thing that bothers me about going into war, not only is it constitutional declaration, but we go in inevitably under the UN.
I believe in free trade. I consider myself one of the strongest free traders in Washington. But I don't like managed trade. And what they call free trade under NAFTA and WTO and all these organizations, that's managed trade by international governments to the benefit of big corporations.
Tied is the Federal Reserve System and the U.S. banking system with the European banking system, the Rothschild, etc.
The international bankers are buddies, you know, and they're closer together, and they deal with policy outside most of the legislative institutions. The central bankers are more powerful than, say, the Congresses of the different countries. They have much more power, and therefore, through the Bank of International Settlement and the IMF and the World Bank, they have total control of this, and they have meetings where even the Secretary of the Treasury doesn't attend. It's strictly the bankers, the Federal Reserve and the Bundestag and all the other banks of the world. They get together and they make these plans, and that's why they come up with the bailout systems, you know, if there's a banking crisis someplace.
A panel of economic experts at the UN are scheduled to meet sometime next week, proposing that the world ditch the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency.
I believe those individuals in this country, and there are plenty, who believe that we should have the right to own and bear arms, ought to be concerned with what's happening in the United Nations, because they are a threat to us. They would confiscate our guns. There have been proposals made at some of their conventions where they would literally repeal the Second Amendment.
There is a major effort taking place to curb free speech in this country, irrespective of our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. And free speech advocates say the United Nations has come down on precisely the wrong side. The United Nations has adopted what it calls a resolution combating defamation of religions. The United Nations now wants to make that anti-blasphemy resolution binding on member nations, including, of course, our own. That would make it a crime in the United States if the United Nations were to have its way to criticize religion.
We're scheduled to have some hearings before the Financial Services Committee. We're to talk about the TARP funds, the additional $350 billion now being requested from the Congress. At the very last minute, the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, Bernanke, has canceled. But here I find out that they have a much more important meeting. They are going to Basel, Switzerland, to attend a meeting at the Bank of International Settlement with other international bankers. But here it is, an emergency meeting for them to run off to Europe and talk about monetary policy and who knows what. One thing for sure is the people will never hear. But to me it is rather sad that Bernanke can get away with pretending he's going to come and then not showing, running off to Europe, and who knows what they're planning. That to me is the important issue. And I will do my darndest to try to find out what really went on at these meetings that they're holding over in Switzerland right now with all the central bankers.
This is really about socialism. The systematic redistribution of wealth by the United Nations and the usurping of your rights as a citizen of this country, the taking away of the Constitution. Our country and our sovereignty is being lost to socialists, globalists, elitists, and corporations, and it's happening right in front of our eyes.
individuals who believe in the right to own property ought to be concerned. But really, the right of private property ownership is severely threatened by our own government. But it's going to be a lot worse if the United Nations gets involved. They believe in socialist redistribution, that everybody owns everything, and they would take from the wealthy and give to the poor to get an equal balance. Same old story that we've heard for years, but they do not protect the right to own private property.
You know, what is the G20 doing? What is happening around the world with Gordon Brown that says, hey, I think we should have a new Deal, but a global New Deal?
But they want to control capital and they want to control the natural resources of the world. And they're planning behind the scenes. We're not entitled to know anything about it. Under the law, they don't have to tell us a thing. But believe me, they're planning. They're panicky because they don't have an easy answer. But there are major changes going on.
This is collective action. I think a new world order is emerging, and with it the foundations of a new and progressive era of international cooperation.